The Anacostia is an 8.7-mile-long river that flows from Prince George's County, Maryland, through Washington, D.C., and into the Potomac. It travels through the eastern portion of the district, directly between wards 5 and 6 to the west and 7 and 8 to the east.
Well, the Anacostia River has always been a divider of our city, and if you go back and look at the earliest records, when President Washington laid out the District of Columbia, he laid out this diamond that's 10 miles on each side, but right up the middle of the diamond is this crack, the Anacostia River.
I know for a lot of younger people, they probably can't relate with that, but east of the river was rather rural to a certain extent.
This natural land divider became a political and cultural divider as D.C. became increasingly industrialized over the second half of the 20th century.
I mean, Washington, D.C. at that time was a segregated city, and legal segregation really drove and dictated a lot of other things. For example, over in far northeast Ward 7 where I grew up, there were no recreation centers up until I was probably about 13, 14 years old. My recreation, along with my friends and everybody who grew up in that area, was basically outdoors.
Mr. Chestnut and his neighborhood friends would spend summer days swimming in the Anacostia. The problem is that industrial expansion of the time came with unregulated environmental pollution that damaged the river.
So we viewed the river as really, that was like our personal beach, I would call it.
I've seen and read about this in many of the cities where, because the river has been polluted years before by manufacturers and other businesses.
America's urban waterways before the Clean Water Act, which was passed in the 70s, were really terrible in shape, especially the urban waterways, because that's where people dumped everything. That was where you bring the barges up for your coal and gas and a lot of things that whether be spilled or otherwise industrial uses. So I believe the river in Cleveland caught on fire, and that was how bad urban rivers had gotten, and Anacostia was no different.
We entered the river by going through what was a landfill, a dump. The city's dump was located over in Ward 7 in what's now called Kenilworth Park. There had to be some impact from the landfill, from the dump. And also it was right on the edge of the Pepco power plant. So you had three things impacting the river right there. You had the railroad, you had the dump, and you had the power plant.
Children in Mr. Chestnut's neighborhood used to play in the Kenilworth Park dump, where the city's trash would be burned in open fires. Ash would be carried by the wind for miles, covering neighborhoods and falling into the river. In 1968, while he was in college, Mr. Chestnut received word from home that a young boy died while playing in the landfill.
And Kevin Mott is the young man's name, and he was probably doing the same thing. He lived in Parkside, just a stone's throw from where the dump was, and was playing around in there, and somehow got caught up in those fires and didn't get out.
In 1969, the dump ended its open burnings, and the dump closed for good in 1970. Around the same time, many people across the country became interested in the health of urban waterways. The Federal Water Pollution Control Act of 1948 was expanded and reorganized in 1972 and became known as the Clean Water Act.
I can say for the last several years there have been major improvements to the cleanup of the Anacostia River. Still very polluted, but the cleanup is visibly able to be seen.
I had visited Switzerland on a family vacation and was struck at just how clean that country is. how clean their waterways are. And it was clear, you don't see trash along their highways. You don't see trash, in their rivers. And they have a lot of laws around how to manage trash. And so I thought, well, during the time that I'm a council member and I can do something about it, I should do something. In particular, I saw a study that said 24% of the trash coming through the tributaries to the Anacostia River, that trash are disposable plastic bags. And for the bags that don't get hung up along the banks, it's around, maybe 10+% of the trash in the main stem of the river.
That prompted then Council Member Wells and a group of other council members to push for the Anacostia River Cleanup and Protection Act. It was accepted by the District of Columbia in 2009 and set the well-known 5-cent plastic bag fee into effect in an effort to fund the cleanup.
I spoke to a high school class just 2 years after it was passed. And, it was late in the day, their heads were on their desks, and they're trying to pay attention. And I said, I'm the guy that passed the bag bill. And they said, yeah, got to pay a nickel. And I said, why did I do that? Clean up the river. And I was like, did it.
Aside from feeling a responsibility to make the Anacostia as healthy as it can be, some people believe that cleaning up the river could help stimulate the economy and bring DC residents, including those living east of the river, together to enjoy the city's natural waterway.
Right now, we're working on coming up with a plan that will go to court that says who's responsible for the worst stuff in the river to clean up those legacy toxins from the Navy Yard, Washington Gas, the electric company, Pepco.
I personally feel that the river can be an economic engine in a lot of ways if it is cleaned up and things that people are able to do, like fish and swim and recreate on it, are more available. I mean, anyone from cities or jurisdictions that have viable waterways, there's a whole economy that takes place around that.
Those canoes where you can cycle in, they're going to start doing that in the Potomac River. And I thought it would be a great reason to bring the citizens of Anacostia down to the park if they could participate in those activities also.
It's been underinvested for many, many years, and the idea was that if we could use that public asset, it's owned by the federal government, if we could use that public asset better, maybe that could help contribute in some way to moderating the effects of displacement or helping to prevent involuntary displacement of people.
We also give grants to groups that employ young people that put trash traps at the end of drainage ditches and creeks. So when there's a big rain and all this trash is coming down, there's a trash trap that catches it, filters it out before it hits the river. And then these young people, they go and they do an audit of what's in there so that we know the most trash that's coming in.
Today, the Anacostia is in much better shape than it was a few decades ago, but there is still room for growth. Nonetheless, with government-funded surveys being done to increase the river's database and independent groups working to install rain gardens across the city and educating students on the importance of environmental sustainability, the future looks bright for the district's once forgotten river.
So I just really wanted to emphasize that all of those things are going to contribute to the river being fishable and swimmable, I think, in the next several years. And that way, hopefully, in my lifetime, I'll get a chance to swim in the Anacostia River again.